My name is Gary Mayor Blackburn. I was born in Fayetteville, Arkansas on August the 3rd, 1950 at the old city hospital. My parents were Simon Samuel Blackburn, who is from Texas, and my mother was Dorothy Maxine Edmondson / Clark, who was from Tulsa, Oklahoma. I have two sisters, Karen, who is deceased. She was 3 years older than me, so she would be if she were alive, she would be 76. And then I have a sister that's 3 years younger than me, Suzanne, and she lives in California, and she is in good health. We spent the first few years in Fayetteville, and then my dad got out of the military, tried civilian life for a while, then decided to re-enlist. And after that, we lived just all over the world and all over the United States. My little sister Suzanne was born in England in 1953. We're there for 3 years. Then we went to Guam, and then we went to Italy, and then we were in Wichita Falls, Texas, and Fort Worth, Texas, Sacramento, California, Victorville, California, and all points in between. So we lived, and I went to school in a lot of different locations. We were in Guam for 3 years, and it was just a great place to be a kid. My most vivid recollection was of the frequent typhoon events that we would have. And we lived on base, and we'd have a community shelter. And it was just like a big play day when a typhoon had come through. All the families would congregate in that typhoon shelter, and us kids thought it was just great. It wasn't good educationally for me. I was in the first and second grade, because when we went back to the United States, I had to redo the second grade. But it was a lot of fun. We spent a lot of time on the beach. It wasn't commercialized. It was just a great place to be a kid. I went to school in Northwest Arkansas 2 or 3 different times. Typically what would happen is my dad would go overseas. He'd get an assignment overseas, and until he could find us a place to live, we would always come back to Bentonville, because my grandmother, Ruth Edmondson Hunt, owned a nursing home in Bentonville. Park Springs Nursing Home is on Northwest A Street. And we would live in the nursing home and go to school in Bentonville until Dad could get us a place to live, and then we would go overseas and be with him. So I was in school in Bentonville on at least 3 different occasions, and then we'd go overseas, and I'd go to school overseas. As I indicated, that may have had a little bit of adverse effect on my ability to retain what I was trying to learn, because my parents realized when I got into junior high, if I was going to get out of high school, they needed to leave me in one place. So I went to Fayetteville in 1966, and I graduated from Fayetteville High School in 1969. I tell people I got my diploma from Fayetteville High School in my left hand, and in my right hand I got my ticket to boot camp. I graduated from high school on Saturday night, and I was in Great Lake, Illinois in Navy boot camp Sunday night.
So talk about that. What was that like?
Well, I joined the Naval Reserve when I was a senior in high school, and so I would go while I was a senior in high school, I went to drills on Tuesday and Wednesday night. So from January until I graduated, each week I had a dose of Navy. So by the time I got to boot camp, I kind of had an idea how it worked. When I got to Great Lake, Illinois, it was the coldest place I'd ever been in my life. We lived in the old World War II barracks, and the wind would blow through there, and it was cold. Even in May, it was just bitterly cold, and I couldn't wait to get out of there. And so I did graduate from boot camp, and they sent me immediately to New York City and put me on the USS DeLong. It was a destroyer escort, and we rode the DeLong from New York City to Philadelphia. and put it in dry dock. And then they sent me back to Fayetteville for a period of time until they could get me into a damage control A school.
So what happened next?
I went to Treasure Island, California. I spent 9 weeks in damage control A school and graduated. And when you graduated from A school, they'd give you a dream sheet, and they'd ask you to list the 3 places you wanted to be stationed. And so I put on my first request, I wanted river patrol boat duty in Vietnam, and then I wanted 2 other choices. Well, they ended up sending me to the USS Berry, DD 933, stationed out of Newport, Rhode Island, and I spent the next 2 years on board the Berry. And while I was on board the Berry, I came home on leave and married the love of my life, my wife Vicki, who I had met in high school while standing in the lunch line. And she actually went back to Newport with me after we got married, and we spent the last 6 months of my active duty time in Newport and Boston. The ship went to the dry docks in Boston, and the commanding officer dispatched me or detached me from the ship and sent me to Johnson & Wales Junior College. So I was still on active duty, but I was being paid to go to college. And I was a third-class petty officer, and Vicki and I couldn't afford a thing as far as rent. And we stumbled onto a house that was given to us to live in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And the gentleman that let us live there was settling the estate for his in-laws. And the man that owned the house was a professor at Harvard. And it was a big 3-story mansion, fully furnished, and we lived there totally free for the last 3 months of my active duty. And it had a library in it that's as big as that meeting hall you and I came out of, and they had a register in that library, everybody that had ever been there. And I went through it one day and I saw that Albert Einstein had been in that library of that house that Vicki and I were living in free of charge. It was a great experience. Of course, school just took about half a day, and so the other half of the day I got me a job in a big greenhouse operation right outside Cambridge. My career path actually started in Boston. My mother, bless her heart, had a brother, James, who was a rural mail carrier in Fayetteville. And I guess she thought that was about the best job that you could ever have. And she dogged me the whole time I was on active duty to take the test to go to work for the post office. So I did. One day in Boston, I went to the post office on a Saturday, and a bunch of us took the test, and I passed it. After I got discharged from the Navy, we left Boston, came back to Fayetteville, and I immediately enrolled in the University of Arkansas. I was going to get a degree in agricultural economics. In the meantime, the post office, my name came up on the register, and they offered me a job. And I turned them down. I was going to school, and I said, I want to get a degree. I don't want to go to work for the post office. And I continued to go to school. My name came up again. And I went in, and Mr. Tuck, who was the postmaster in Fayetteville, the last political appointee of a postmaster in Fayetteville, offered me the job again, and I turned it down. Shortly thereafter, they offered me a schoolboy job, and I just worked evenings. I could go to school during the day, and I could work at the Fayetteville post office of the night for 3 hours for $3.96 an hour, more money than I'd ever made in my life. I couldn't imagine how I was going to be able to spend all that money. And so then my name came up on the register again, the third and final time, and I decided to accept the job, but Mr. Tuck declined me. He turned me down. And by rights, they should have dropped my name off the list, but they didn't, because Lloyd Elam, my supervisor for the schoolboy program, liked me. I was a good worker, and he knew there was a position coming open, and he held my name, and he hired me at the Fayetteville Post Office, where I clerked for the next 5 years. And in 1978, I was the second person in this area to receive a postmaster appointment under the merit system in the United States Postal Service. I was hired into the post office department, And in 1972, I believe it was, they switched to the Postal Service. And so I was appointed postmaster in Avoca, Arkansas in 1978 under the merit system. And I stayed there for 2 years, and then I moved Vicki and my son Shane and my daughter Jill to Avoca. And at the end of 2 years, I told the bosses, I said, you do one of two things. You find me something to do, or I'm going to quit. I'd get my mail at 8 o'clock in the morning, and at 8:15, I'd be through for the day. All I could do is stand there and wait for customers to come in. In 1980, they promoted me to postmaster in Garfield. And that they had a rule at that time that postmasters had to live in the community that they served. So I had to move from Avoca to Garfield. And I still live in that same house today that we moved to in 1980. And I served as postmaster at Garfield for the next 11 years. And I didn't stay in Garfield very much. They'd send me on the road for details. They'd send me to Springdale to supervise. They'd send me to Harrison to be officer in charge. Or they'd send me to Mountain Home to be officer in charge. Or they'd send me to Fort Smith to supervise down there. I was always on the go. And based upon the experience that I gained in all those details, when the superintendent of postal operations position came open in Bentonville, I got it. This was this had been in the 80s, 90s, early 90s, and I was superintendent of postal operations for a short while. Then I got the postmaster's job in Bentonville, and I stayed there 7 or 8 years. And then the postmaster job in Rogers came open, and I applied for it, and I got it. And so, to the best of my knowledge, I'm the only person in the history of the Postal Service that has been a postmaster at 4 post offices in Benton County, Arkansas. And I ended my career the last 3 years as plant manager of the mail processing facility in Fayetteville, retiring in the same city that I began my career at 33 years earlier. Well, in Avoca, being postmaster in Avoca, as I indicated, I'd get my mail at 8 o'clock in the morning. I'd get 1 sack of mail, and all I had was post office boxes. It took me 15 minutes to get the mail up, and then all I did was sell stamps the rest of the day. I was bored to death, and I had to find something to do, so I ran for mayor. And for whatever reason, the good people in Avoca chose to elect me as their mayor. And so I'd fill in the rest of my day at the post office doing mayor work. And it turned out to be a pretty good deal. We had a good life in Avoca, and I probably would have stayed there, but the post office had a mandatory rule that if you had an office that had delivery, you had to live in that city. So in 1980, when I got promoted to Garfield, I had to move. I had to retire from being mayor in Avoca, and I moved to Garfield. Garfield was probably the best job I ever had in the Postal Service. When I got here, I had 2 carriers, Coley Byler and L.J. Dart. Both of them were born and raised in Garfield, and back in those days, all the mail was sorted by hand. So I would stand there and sort the mail for those 2 guys and listen to them talk about Garfield. And I learned more about Garfield and the people of Garfield from those 2 guys than people can ever begin to imagine. I knew Garfield just listening to LJ and Coley. It was a great job, but pretty quick like the bosses saw that I needed to learn more. I needed to learn how to supervise city delivery, and that's when they started sending me on the road. So they sent me on the road to get all this experience, and then when Bentonville came open, it was like going home for me. When I became postmaster in Bentonville, because we had lived in Bentonville so many times when I was growing up, it was just like going home. I knew a lot of the people. The mayor at the time, Steve Birchie, he and I had gone to school together. It was great. And as postmaster, I built that first branch office in Bella Vista and opened it. And we spent a lot of time as when I was a kid in Bella Vista. We were there when it started. I learned to water ski on Lake Bella Vista when I was a kid. And we'd spend our summer vacations there, rent one of those big houses, and you could spend time on the lake. You could go to the swimming pool. They had miniature golf, they had horseback riding, and they had the cave. You could spend your whole vacation right there in Bella Vista, and it was a great place. So postmaster in Bentonville was a great job too. I had a great staff. The work ethic was really good, and I probably never should have left Bentonville, but I was enticed by the promotion. When Rogers came open, I put in for it, and I got the postmaster job in Rogers. So when I went to Rogers, we were in the old facility on Walnut Street, which the post office had leased for like 45 years. And it was so crowded that I had to lease a building off 2nd Street and move half my carriers across town. We just didn't have room. We were growing so much and so fast, as the area still is, that I had to split my operation up. So the post office decided to build a new facility, the one that's over on 8th Street now, and they built it on the old football stadium. I'd played football on that field when I was a Bentonville Cub at one time. And so I was postmaster in Rogers when we built that new facility that they still use on 8th Street. And then after, when it got down to the last 3 years, I decided I want to take on that mail processing job, and I ended my career in Fayetteville as plant manager at a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week operation, and I loved every minute of it. It was a great job too.
When you worked in Bentonville and Rogers, are there any people that you met over the years that stand out? I mean, I'm sure you met a lot of people. But...
Oh yeah, well, in those days, postmasters would be members of Rotary Club. And so I was a member of Rotary Club in Rogers, and I was a member of the Rotary Club in Bentonville. I was president of the Rotary Club in Bentonville. So yeah, I was in Rotary with all the Bogles, the people that started Bentonville on its track to prosperity. Dr. Neil Compton, the gentleman that led the project to have the Buffalo River designated as a national park. I was in Rotary with him. As a matter of fact, the last time I was in a canoe on the Buffalo River, Dr. Compton was in the canoe with me. It was one of the best days of my life. I'll never forget it. Every bend we'd go around, he could tell me who had owned the farm next to it, and he could explain the soil makeup, and it was one of those days you just relive and relive. At the end of the day, we pulled into Harrison. It was he and I and Frank Butler, and we had a spaghetti dinner and came home. So Dr. Compton had actually been one of the doctors that went to my grandmother's nursing home when I was a kid, and here I was, a grown man in a canoe with him going down the Buffalo River that he had designated as a state park. It was a great day. So the Bogles, the Comptons, just all the people, or anybody in Bentonville and Rogers, I knew them at one time.
Well, you talked about being the postmaster and then later the mayor of Avoca. So how did you end up mayor in Garfield? Tell that story.
Okay. When of course, we moved to Garfield in 1980, and my wife was looking for a part-time job, and she actually got into politics before I did. She ran for and was elected as the recorder treasurer for Garfield. And the recorder treasurer also maintained the books for the water system. I think we had less than 100 water customers on our water system at that time. But she did her job. She ran the water system and kept all the city books in our living room at our home on Mountain Drive. And so it was part of our life. People were always coming and going, paying water bills, signing up for water, and conducting council meetings. They did it in our living room, so I got interested in it. I started following it, and I decided to run for city council. And right here is a picture of me being sworn in as a council member by then Mayor Lynn Welsh. And you can see my lovely wife down here keeping the record of the minutes. And here is Buddy Seamster. He was another council member. He was a principal in Garfield at one time. And here's Howard Ross, who was an elder in the Church of Christ. And here is Ruth Carter, and she was the cook at the Garfield School at one time. So that was when I started my political career in Garfield as an alderman. So I kept track of what was going on all the years, and when I retired from the Postal Service, it just seemed like a natural progression to get more involved. The city had given so much to me, I looked at it as an opportunity to give something back to the city. So I ran for, it was 10 years ago, I ran for mayor against the incumbent, Laura Hamilton, who was the very popular postmaster here in Garfield at the time. And I worked at it pretty hard. I knocked on every door in Garfield and gave them one of those cards that said my dog would vote for me if she could. And I was elected mayor for the first time and haven't looked back since. It's been quite an adventure. Our water system has grown exponentially. We've gone from, one of my goals was, well, two things. People told me, when they elected me mayor, when I was going around campaigning, they said, in Garfield, we want to see starlights instead of street lights. And so the council's members that I've been honored to work with, we've tried to fulfill that request in as far as controlling growth. And I think we've been pretty successful. Garfield is still a nice rural community to live in. Our water system has gone from like 80 customers when we were doing it out of the living room of our home to 300 customers now, and growing every month. People have realized that Garfield really is a good place to live, and they're moving here right along. Our water is purchased. Garfield buys their water from, as you mentioned, the 2-ton water system, which is actually the Benton, Washington Regional Public Water Authority, which I'm a member of their board of directors. I'm the representative for Garfield, Gateway, and Lost Bridge Village. So we buy, on an average month, we'll buy 1,500,000 gallons. We'll sell 1 million to 1.2 million, and that 300,000 gallons is unaccounted for water loss. It'll vary from 6% to 16% on any given month. When I first became mayor, we were running 40% water loss, but we had a lot of obsolete analog water meters, and we've since replaced them with all electronic read meters that transmit the readings to the office here, so our recorder treasurer can read the water meters from the office. We find more water leaks in our customers' homes than most customers do. She can tell if your toilet's leaking at night, and every day we'll call people and say, hey, you need to look at your toilets. Something's leaking. You have a water leak. So we really increase the efficiency of monitoring the water we sell when we put those new meters in. They actually have no moving parts in them whatsoever. They read the ions in the water, and we get a lot more efficient reading, and our water loss has gone down exponentially. Another big factor, is having a dedicated water distribution operator. about 3 years ago, I hired a young man that was born and raised here in Garfield, Duncan Art. He was still in Peerage High School, and I made him our water distribution operator. He has since gone on and got his distribution 1 and 2 certifications and is certified as a plumbing inspector, and he works hard at making sure that we have an efficient and profitable and safe water system. I'd put our water system up against anybody's certainly of our size in the state.
What are some of the issues besides water that you dealt with as mayor?
Well, I be it right or be it wrong, I announced when I became mayor that it was my goal to pave every road in Garfield. And at that time, probably a third of the roads were actually paved. Now we have maybe 3 roads that aren't paved. We did $300,000 worth of paving in 2023. We pave roads every year. So I believe that's a big bonus to property owners. It ups the value of their property. It makes their cars last longer, and the council supports that program 100%. So we devote a lot of money every year to really 2 things. I tell people we're in the water business, and we are. Half my day every day is spent on water related issues. The rest of it is spent on roads and parks. So we're doing a good job at paving roads.
Tell me, what was the town like when you got here, and then how has it changed over the years? When you first got here?
Yeah, when I first got here in 1980, it didn't take me 6 months, and I knew the names of everybody in the area. We had 2 routes at the time, Route 1 and Route 2, and that includes the Lost Bridge Village area and Gateway area. It seemed like everybody knew everybody. It was we'd have basketball tournaments down at the school, and it would be standing room only. And they'd be standing in the halls when you go down to school. You look at the windows that look over the gym, and they'd be lying in the halls looking through those windows watching the kids play basketball. Both my oldest son and daughter played basketball 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. No, 4th, 5th, and 6th grades at Garfield. And we'd have tournaments, and we'd bring in teams from Oklahoma and Missouri, and it was a big community event. And then we'd have the fall festival, and at the fall festival we'd have a bingo game going, and people would donate so many prizes to give away at bingo that we'd have to go to midnight, 1 o'clock to get rid of all of them. The way it's changed is now that that Halloween carnival starts at 5:30 and it's over at 7:30, and it's the crowds in and out, and the school system has changed the boundaries. They've sent a bunch of the kids to Rogers that used to go to school out here, and it's just not the same tight community that it used to be. A lot of the older folks just died and gone on. And as you know, or will know after you talk to Bobby Vaughn tomorrow, that this is the last year for the Garfield Elementary School to be in operation. And at the end of this year, the Rogers school system is going to send all the kids to town or to the Garfield Scholars Academy. And the Garfield Scholars Academy has met their goal of 80 students, and they're going to open for business this coming fall in the Garfield Baptist Church. And their plan is they're going to have K through 5 this first year, and they plan to add a grade every year until they get to high school. So they have big plans for the Garfield Scholars Academy that's going to open this coming fall. Well, I'm really excited about it right now. Miss Joy Sawyer and her associate, Miss Melanie, who have been educators for the last 30 years at every level of education in the state of Arkansas, decided when they heard that Garfield was closing, the way it worked was Miss Sawyer heard about Garfield closing, and she communicated to her husband. They were talking one Sunday night. She was distraught. She couldn't hardly imagine Garfield without a school. And he told her, he said, well, Joy, if you feel that strong about it, start a charter school. Just do it. And at the time, she was a teacher at Springdale. The next morning, that next Monday morning, on his way to work, he was killed in a car accident. And it has become a passion for Miss Joy to start the Garfield Scholars Academy. And they're there. They've got the building lined up. They've got the students lined up. They've got the funding lined up. We're going to continue to have an elementary school in Garfield. We have had a local philanthropist offer to buy 40 acres of land and donate it for the construction of a new school here in Garfield. So I have great hope and ambition for the Garfield Scholars Academy in the years to come. We're not in competition with Rogers Public Schools. We're going to work hand in hand. Our goal is to send them 5th, 6th, 7th graders that are well prepared to assimilate into the Rogers system. That's what we've always done. We send our kids after the end of the 5th grade to the Rogers school system now, and we're going to continue to do that, and we'll continue to work with the Rogers school system to be successful in that event. The school superintendent, Dr. Jeffrey Perry, lives here in Garfield, and we're going to work with him to make sure Garfield Scholars Academy is an asset to the educational process here in the Rogers School District.
Tell me about the history of some of your businesses. We were talking the other day about the ice cream, and so talk about some of the stores and how well they've done. And
the bus stop, everybody knows it started out as a bus stop, and Gary Bus started on the south side of Highway 62, where he built a thriving business selling what we call giant ice cream cones. A small ice cream cone is this tall. It's comical to sit down there in the summer to watch people order a large ice cream cone, which is up here like this, and try to eat it or get it in the cup quick enough before it starts melting. But Gary operated on that side of the road for an extended period of time. And then a fella came in and built a really nice facility across the street from him, and was going to make more of a grocery store out of it. Well, he didn't last long. He couldn't really compete with Gary and his brother, and so he left. And Gary moved to the larger facility across the street, and it's called now the Village Market, and it is in essence the economic engine of Garfield. It's a gas station, convenience store, and a restaurant, and at any given time, depending on who's working there, you can get excellent meals, 3 meals a day. Right now, White Oak Station Corporation owns the property, and they're doing a pretty good job of keeping it going. We're blessed to have I think, one of the best Dollar General stores in the chain. It's managed well. The shelves are always stocked. They've got the freezer section, and it does a thriving business also. And then we have what we call the Village Market on the far west side of town, which is a convenience store, gas station, and then at the other end, the only liquor store in Garfield. So those three are they compromise in essence the retail base for our sales tax revenue here in Garfield. We have some cabinets factories, and we have some mechanics and body shops and things like that. But those three retail outlets generate the biggest part of our sales tax. And
so, Mayor, tell me about this place.
Formerly it's still the Flying RF feed store, formerly owned by the Fortner family until here just about 2 months ago. And the Pitts family bought it, and they're local. They have a farm here in town, so they bought this outlet, and they also bought the feed store in Pea Ridge. And they continue to offer great service, sell hay to nuts and bolts to chicks, and you can get your hair cut right behind you. About 3 years ago, the city council had the wisdom to pass a half-cent sales tax, the proceeds of which can only be used to support infrastructure improvements on our water system. So that puts us in a really good position compared to a lot of other water systems, because in the summer we're a tourist town. You have to go through Garfield to get to the Lost Bridge Village area, which you may or may not know is a highly popular place to camp and boat. I believe it to be one of the most beautiful parts of the lake. So we get a lot of traffic during the summer, and we like to see everybody get an ice cream cone while they're here. I go all over the state. Now I'll introduce myself as Gary Blackburn, Mayor of Garfield, home of the giant ice cream cone, and invariably they'll say, "Oh yes, we always stop and get one of those ice cream cones every time we go through town." And 0.5% of it goes to support our water system, and that's a great thing. I don't think that approach to supporting a utility, a municipal utility, is common anywhere in Northwest Arkansas. And again, I'm on the board of directors of the 2-ton, and we're the only ones that support the infrastructure with a sales tax revenue. And Act 603 was passed by the Arkansas State Legislature about 3 years ago, and I believe they had in mind, the legislature had in mind, small systems like Garfield, because typically small systems, water systems like Garfield, have a hard time paying the bills. They just don't have enough customers, and they can't keep the infrastructure up. And part of Act 605 gave the Natural Resources Commission the authority to essentially make systems consolidate into larger systems if they weren't financially sound. And I'm paraphrasing the law, but that's the intent of it. And so by having that 0.5-cent sales tax that allows us to keep our infrastructure up, that keeps us off their radar. We have an analysis of our water rate structure, and if you compare our water rates with the other systems in Northwest Arkansas, we're dead in the middle. 4,000 gallons of water, including trash, will cost you $65 a month in Garfield. So we're pretty happy with the level of water service we provide our customers in the city limits, and we have 20% of our customers actually live in Benton County, and they constitute a special category of customers, and they actually have 2 representatives that address our council for county residents as it relates to water issues. Wastewater would be feasible in that, and it was an issue that I addressed when I first came into office, and my idea at the time was to consolidate with Avoca and Gateway, and we were going to pump the sewage to Pea Ridge. And we had talked to the officials in Pea Ridge, and they were all about it. They just built a new sewer system over there, and they were having to feed it dog food because they didn't have enough fluent to go in it to keep it active. Well, you know what's happened in Pea Ridge since then. They've blown up, and they no longer have a need for sewage from this part of the county. However, there may well be an opportunity to enter into some sort of a combined agreement with Lost Bridge Village Water and Sewer. And we're in ongoing talks with them at this very time. NEBCO, Northeast Benton County Fire Department, I believe to be the gold standard for volunteer fire departments in Benton County. they've been very forward thinking. They have, last count, I know they have at least 5 or 6 stations that they man. They have 3 staff members on call 24 hours a day to man the ambulance. They also have an ambulance system that NEBCO manages, and they're just the hub. If there were a hub of the community, it would be NEBCO. A lot of the social events nowadays revolve around their pancakes, their pancake breakfast, their chili lunch, their turkey shoot. We plan for those events all year long. So they're fundraisers for NEBCO so they can buy the equipment they need. And also, as residents of the NEBCO Fire District, we pay dues through our property taxes to support them. And I don't think anybody begrudges them a penny of what they get. We have an outstanding volunteer fire department, NEBCO, and they're right next door to us. As far as the history goes, you've got to tie us in with the Pea Ridge Battlefield Park. Our city limits borders the Pea Ridge Battlefield Park. Garfield sells them water. They get their mail from the Garfield post office. So I feel like the Pea Ridge Battlefield Park is just as much part of Garfield as it is Pea Ridge. And it's just a beautiful park, 7 miles of trails with educational facilities that I would put up against anybody's. So the Pea Ridge Battlefield Park is a draw. A lot of tourists plan their vacations around visiting that park. I call Garfield the home of 3 parks. We have the Pea Ridge Battlefield Park. We have the Hamilton Park, which was named after former Mayor Laura Hamilton, and that's where City Hall is. And we also have the 300-acre Robb and Milena Walton Nature Preserve, which is at the end of Ford Road. There is flora on the Robb and Milena Walton Nature Preserve that you'll not find anywhere else in the state of Arkansas. And it was set up and established in what I think is a very unique way. The people that live on Ford Road, which goes from Highway 127, Ford Road leads directly to the Robb and Milena Walton Nature Preserve. Those people agreed to be, it's been about 6 years ago now, the stakeholders for that property. And so they take it upon themselves at no compensation to keep it mowed and to keep it maintained. And you can go there now and take the trails from Ford Road, where they have a parking area, all the way down to Beaver Lake. And it's done by volunteer labor. And I don't think you'll find that done in a whole lot of communities either. So Pea Ridge Battlefield Park, Hamilton Park, Robb and Milena Walton Nature Preserve. Excuse me. 3 big draws, I believe, for Garfield. Our neighboring communities being Lost Bridge Village, number 1. You have to go through Garfield, essentially, to get to Lost Bridge Village. It started out as a retirement community similar to the concept that they used when they started Bella Vista. They would send out invitations to people that lived in Illinois, Iowa, Indiana, places up east, invite them to come to Lost Bridge Village for a weekend. They'd put them up in a cabin. They'd see how beautiful the lake was. They'd sell them a lot. The theory being that when they retired, they'd come to Lost Bridge Village and build them a house. That business model was successful, maybe not quite as successful as it was in Bella Vista, but nonetheless, a lot of people have chose to retire from places east and west and have settled in Lost Bridge Village. Lost Bridge Village, everybody that lives there has a Garfield mailing address. So they're big supporters of NEBCO. You have to believe NEBCO has to have a lot of volunteers to keep it going, and a lot of their board of directors come from Lost Bridge Village. Then there's Gateway, 4 miles up Highway 62, and Gateway's just like Garfield, only different. They have a little less retail, but they have a water system, and they have a base community, and we have a good relationship with the Gateway City Council and with their water people. We give mutual aid. And so you have Lost Bridge Village, Gateway, and then to some extent Avoca still is, we're all on Highway 62. So we're all tied together pretty tight. It's a good community. And they all three have Garfield mailing addresses. Garfield mailing addresses go all the way to Pea Ridge, to nearly to Rogers, to the lake, and nearly to Carroll County. So that gives us a common denominator, really. We get phone calls every day from somebody who said, well, I live in Garfield, and we'll look on the Benton County GIS map, and they may well be in Avoca, or they might be in Gateway, or they might be in Lost Bridge Village, but they have a Garfield mailing address. 2019, the Arkansas State Legislature, if you look at the city limits, where's the best sign, the best picture of the city limits? You can see on that one there, you can see the one behind you. Our city limits runs all the way to the Missouri line. And that was done on purpose. At the time that we established that connection with Missouri, Arkansas state law said that if you're a border city, you can charge the same excise tax on cigarettes as the city that you border. Well, the excise tax on cigarettes in Missouri is about $1 a pack less than the excise tax on cigarettes is in Arkansas. And so for decades, Garfield benefited from that lower price of cigarettes. People would come from all over Benton County and even Washington County to buy cigarettes in Garfield. The owner of the Village Market told me before the law changed in 2019, he would sell 500 cases of cigarettes a month. And after the law changed, he went to selling 50 cases of cigarettes a month. So you can imagine the hit our sales tax revenue took. Not only us, but Benton County. Benton County lost 6.5% of the sale on every one of those packs of cigarettes that the people are now going to Missouri to buy. So when I heard about it 2 weeks before it went into effect, I immediately called every border city mayor and asked them if they knew about it. None of them knew about it. I called the Arkansas Municipal League and I said, hey, you're our representatives at the legislature. What's this deal with our border tax going away? They didn't know anything about it. Somebody slipped it into a bill and it passed. Well, I got our local delegation, Representative Joshua Bryant, at the time he's Senator Bryant now, he kind of led the charge for us to get us a hearing before the Senate committee that controlled that decision. And of course we had a lot of support in the area, and I went down and explained to them. I said, folks, think about what you're doing. You're sending all those cigarette sales from Pea Ridge, Bella Vista, Garfield, and Sulphur Springs. They're all going to Missouri now. It's costing Benton County 6.5%. It's costing the state. We're losing money. Why did you do this? I might as well have been talking to the wall as talking to that Senate committee, because they'd made up their mind and they weren't about to change it. So that was a big deal for our little community. It brought a lot of people to town to buy cigarettes, and then there's the market basket effect. While they were in there buying those cigarettes, they'd also buy a candy bar, or they'd buy a Coke, or they'd buy something else. So economically, it probably hurt Garfield more than it did anybody else. Bella Vista, which is a border city, and Pea Ridge, which is a border city, they both have big economic bases, more so than we do. So we've had to make some adjustments because of that. But our council saw it happening. We just adjusted it, and we're living with it. But it does stick in my craw that the legislature did that without asking the cities, and that the municipal league let it happen without advising the cities. Well, I told you we're on the proposed route for the bike path. It'll eventually go all the way from Bentonville through Garfield up to Springfield, Missouri, so people will be able to ride their bicycles all the way through Garfield up to Missouri, and that's going to be a big deal. I believe I'll live to see that happen. Garfield has participated in the Walton Family Foundation tree planting program very much so the last 3 years. We put out, funded by the Walton Family Foundation, we put out over $50,000 worth of trees in this community along Highway 62, and in donations to residents. We have a spring and a fall tree giveaway, and they're hugely successful. And Highway 62 will one day be lined with big, beautiful trees because of the generosity of the Walton Family Foundation. And that's a big, big thing to us.
If you ran into somebody who wasn't from Benton County that maybe had never been here before and asked you about it, which may happen, what do you tell them?
I tell them go to Pea Ridge or go to Rogers, because remember what I told you in the beginning? People said they wanted to see starlights instead of street lights. Scott, Garfield is a great place to live, and we're going to grow. We're going to have a school. We're convenient. We're right on Beaver Lake. It takes 10 minutes to be in Rogers, 25 minutes to be in Fayetteville. We've got good water. We've got affordable electricity. And it's just a great place to live. But we don't want to look out our window and see our neighbor. We like our space here in Garfield. And so I would say, if you're a person that likes space and you want to live on an acre or 5 acres, and you can find somebody in Garfield to sell it to you, come on down. But more than likely, you'll end up in Pea Ridge or somewhere like that, because they have the sewer and they can afford the density. My favorite thing about Benton County, hands down, and you got to think about my history now, is the people. It's still the people. As I've always been a public servant. From the day I went to work for the post office in Fayetteville to the time I came to Avoca, to Garfield, to Bentonville, to Rogers, to Mayor in Garfield, I consider myself a public servant. And I truly, truly love helping the good people in this county. And we still have a county where people work together. The mayor's here in Benton County. We have a monthly Zoom meeting, and we get together and we talk about common issues and concerns and things that we can do better. And I don't know that you'll find that in just every part of the state or every part of the other states. We've got great people here in Garfield and in Benton County. It's just a good place to live, good place to raise kids, good place to educate kids. You have the Northwest Arkansas Community College, which is the largest community college in Arkansas that's here in Benton County. It gets kids, they're halfway through their college. They can get their 4-year degree there now. I started college at the University of Arkansas, but switched over to Northwest Arkansas Community College in Harrison, and finally got my associate's degree there in 1980. Then I got my bachelor's degree from the University of Arkansas in 2005 when I was 55 years old, and did it all living right here in Garfield, Arkansas. That's great. That's a great opportunity. It's the people. You just can't beat the people.